after the Prime Minister spoke, we'd get together on a meeting to decide what's been told. Are we opening, closing? Are we going left or right? And then I'd write something to the staff every evening by 8 o'clock. Even when we're coming up with a name, at that moment in time, I lived on the corner of Cavendish Road. So if I'm really honest, I looked out the window and had to come up with something which wasn't my name. I was very clear it shouldn't be anything to do associated with me. But so that we came with Cavendish. Look, when you're small, and for most of this journey, we've been very small, almost any of the schools that we were to bring in could have broken us. When you're abroad, you really get a sense of the character and virtues, is the rigor. There's something really special about what we have here.
Welcome to B2 Education Unpacked, the podcast where we get under the skin of the business of education. I'm your host, Stella James, and in each episode, I'll sit down with inspiring guests from across the education sector, innovators, leaders, and change makers, to explore the trends, challenges, and opportunities shaping the future. Whether you're working in education, building solutions, or just passionate about the future of learning, you're in the right place. Let's unpack the big ideas and real stories driving education technology forward.
So, Aatif, welcome to B2 Education Unpacked. Very nice, warm welcome.
Likewise, great to be chatting.
Oh, I love the office as well.
Thank you so much.
I know I've got some nice little things coming out from a teaser perspective to promote the podcast. I'm going to go straight into the questions because I've got a few questions to ask you. And you've got a really interesting background, really interesting. You were expelled from school, all right? So you've got dyslexia and ADHD. And now you run one of the biggest private education groups in UK. At what point did you genuinely believe this was possible? Or were you faking it with the confidence the whole time?
Well, lots to unpack there. The dyslexia and ADHD, and perhaps the dyslexia more. And I know for many children, it can be a real burden, struggle. And I remember sitting in the classroom myself and really being deeply frustrated, not understanding why I couldn't learn like the people next to me. But now I have used it as a superpower. Mm-hmm. I've been able to reframe the positives. And one of those things that I believe it gives me is real simplicity of thought. And many will talk about its ability to give out-of-the-box thinking. So I think that's one thing that really has helped in framing where the organization goes and in giving real clarity about our future. If I can't explain it, then I know someone else can't understand it. And so that's the first thing. I think the second, I would say, is we have been forming our purpose, our vision, and refining it as we go along. Now, from the outset, we wanted to be truly special. We wanted to be truly impactful for young people. We want to put children at the heart of the organization. And we always thought we'd be here and we were building something for multi-generations. But as the journey has gone on, let's be honest, the scale has got bigger, far more than we imagined. And yeah, we're even more excited by what we can achieve today than we were a decade ago when we founded it.
But what point did you go, actually, this is happening, in your brain, and thought, I am actually building something amazing here? Because my son's got ADHD and he was like you, dismissed from school completely. And he's super successful now, but there must have been a point where you were like, yeah, this is all, am I just blagging this sort of thing?
I mean, all of the time. I remember the moment where the first school, which was Girton in Cambridge, in a village just outside central Cambridge called Girton. And I got the keys. And while standing outside the gates of this very derelict sort of council-looking building, which today is a glorious gardens and 9 acres of land with football pitches and delightful children running around and everything. But at that moment in time, it'd been a police dog school and a failed school on the site. And standing there in front of the school, I burst into tears. And I was just overwhelmed by the enormity of that. Actually, suddenly this building was something I was responsible for. And, and I had responsibility before. I'd run businesses. I'd been in the city. I'd been in the military. I had a family. I had, properties. And, so it wasn't the scale of it, perhaps, but it was the responsibility that suddenly staff and children and something which was really going to shape people's lives was solely the responsibility of myself now. And there've been moments along that journey where, whilst I think most entrepreneurs are probably glass half full, they're probably looking around the corner and they're looking at where else can they be. But clearly you do have those milestones and you reflect back and you go, this is incredibly humbling. I feel incredibly grateful for everyone that supported me. And I feel phenomenally blessed for the people that are around me. So I did sort of sit there and go, I just think that I'm really blown away by the people that are running this organization and that are mostly better than me in that they have joined the rocket ship to make this thing go faster.
It's interesting you say that. I was listening to a podcast by Stephen Bartlett, and he said exactly that. I'm not the greatest one in this one. My team is the greatest one in this, in his business. So it's interesting, that's how you see it now that you've built something that is a bit of a beast, really. It's a massive platform. You mentioned, sorry, who you was?
No, I was going to say that I think I love rugby. It's one of my deep passions in life, and we famously
you like the score at the weekend then?
I thought we did. I thought we did remarkably well. Very unlucky, obviously, to lose against France.
Yeah.
But when we famously won the World Cup in 2003, and everyone obviously remembers Matt Dawson passing Johnny Wilson, hitting it off the wrong foot, and it going over and beat Australia. But actually, in one of the interviews with Sir Clyde Woodward, he talked about how, and I think Martin Johnson, also the captain at the time, said they had 15 captains on the pitch. And I think one of the things the Dukes and at Cavendish we've got is I'm pretty certain that actually most of my top team could run the organisation. And actually, the analogy is I think we've been able to build the 15 captains on the pitch, as in 15 captains around the boardroom table now. And that's really powerful.
And it must be quite humbling for you as well. You must get a lovely warm feeling just to go, look at this. This is amazing.
That warm feeling comes, and I had it this morning when I walked downstairs and there's some children talking about sustainability. There's a people summit going on below where we're sitting right now, and just seeing children in our training centre and doing things which are classically outside the classroom, which I know that are massively contribute to their character development and their education. And that goes, wow, that's what we want.
That's right. That's
what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I mean. That's a real tear-jerking, heartful moment, isn't it? You just mentioned about your career, and you have, private equity taught, buy, optimize, and exit, but you're still chairman of Dukes. You haven't sold it yet. Why? And is there a number that could change your mind?
So my former career in everything I've done in sport, in the military, in banking, in private equity has most definitely shaped how we've run both Dukes and Cavendish. And it has meant that when you walk around the office, you can see some aspects of the military. There's a sort of regimental focus. There's real pride in the badge. And similarly, the commerciality and rigor of raising money to financial discipline clearly helps from private equity. But Dukes was always built never to sell.
Never?
No.
Not even if it came with a number?
I don't have any ambition, and no one will ever hear me quoted on here is a target of number of schools we need to acquire, or equally a number that we want to sort of sell for. I think what we want to do is to create a legacy, and we will raise money. We will be financially disciplined, and we will want to succeed. And I think you can do that by raising permanent capital, which we've been able to do, which is very different from fixed life investors who need a return over 2 or 3 years. And they're wonderful, but it's just different to our model.
Mm-hmm.
And we are doing something slightly different. And we try and retain our freehold properties, which make not make economic sense to many people. And we want to be here for a very, very long time. And I hope the next generation get involved in it. You never say never, because, I could fall unwell and something could happen. But the mindset has to be, we're building something which is going to be a legacy project and here for multi-generational. So, yeah, I think there isn't an exit strategy in mind, as it were. And I think you drive your business in a very different way. You make decisions, and the office that you're seeing and you're seeing downstairs wouldn't be built investing in 100 million in West London at this moment in time, when we talk about VAT and the economic challenges that the UK has got, putting another 100 million into Cardiff Bay, into a flagship sixth form project, whilst most people are running out the UK. Those returns are going to be sought after a very, very long period of time. And there's many other mini projects going on across the organization, which I know will help us in maybe 10 years time, maybe in 20. And it's very clearly you drive a very long-term mindset.
As I've just listened to you, it sounds like you had a foundation, but you're going deeper down into that foundation in order for it to survive longer. I think effectively, because, the Cardiff idea, I was just talking to Anna about that. That's amazing, really, really interesting project that you're sort of launching.
Well, I keep saying, and I say this humbly, I work with the royal family, as many people know, and I think they're one of maybe our greatest assets in exporting Britishness, and alongside maybe Premier League football or financial services. But I still believe, even in the context of those great organizations or institutions, education is our greatest export. And Cardiff is, by virtue of A-level results, the best school in the world. And we should be incredibly proud, not only Dukes, but also as a United Kingdom, about having something as grand as that. And for that organization now to be in a really inspirational place of learning, and the new campus, which is an old merchant's hall, effectively like almost a trading hall, high ceilings, very grand building, right in the heart of now Cardiff Bay, which is basically the new city, almost adjacent to the main town, is going to be something which is truly special, and we should tell the world about it.
That's a big statement, saying it's going to be the best in the world, and that's fantastic.
I'm not saying it's going to be. I'm saying it is.
Is when your sales team pitches features to school leaders, you will lose deals you should be winning. Education Sales Mastery teaches concept-led selling, how to align your product to what schools actually care about, run real discovery conversations, and handle objections without dropping your price. Find it at seventhsibling.co.uk.
Yeah, no, good. Why education though? I'm going into theory because you've done care homes, veterinary clinics, and now education. It's very different, isn't it? If you go from private equity, then care homes. So walk me through the deal or the moment where you realised that education was the sector. And I know I've got the question, was it the marketing opportunity, and I know now, talking to you, that's clearly not it. So at what point did you go, I want education? I don't want to do care homes or vets or...
So care homes was the family business. My father was involved in that sector, and very sadly, when he became poorly and had a series of mini strokes, I took over that organization. And it's incredibly rewarding looking after the elderly. There's a real dignity, and it's humbling to hear their stories and to be involved at a very sort of spiritual time of their life when actually it's coming to an end. Equally, it's deeply depressing.
I'm not just in a care home, so I know.
And you're trying to give these people the best end of life as possible, but almost on a daily basis, given the scale of the organization, you were dealing with funeral homes and phoning up families to say their loved one had passed away. And whilst it's purposeful, and I can see why lots of people can get excited by it, it just wasn't for me. The things we did in private equity were obviously institutional and things that give that organization an economic return, things like vets and dentists and other things. But for me, when it came to it and I wanted to found my own organization, I was very clear that I wanted to do not only something which was impactful for society, as some of those other things are, but I really wanted to work with children. I very sadly lost my oldest son, so I knew the value of a child's life. My mum had passed away when I was very little, so I had a slightly different upbringing than most people, and I suddenly knew the value a school could do. Having been thrown out of school, the school I then went to just really sort of cared for me, and alongside my father, just became that extended family. And the power of a teacher is not just that moment where they're teaching you maths and English and Latin and the functional subjects, but they're a counselor, they're a family, they're a support. We talk about so much today about psychological safety, and they're giving you this sort of stoic belief that you're going to succeed. And it's that confidence and innate relationship that exists between teacher and pupil, which is just so special. And so from my first-hand experiences, I was absolutely always getting into education. Now, how we found our feet in terms of looking after children with unique learning profiles, children with dyslexia and autism, is totally linked to my own learning needs. But equally in Duke's, it's what I could see there's a huge need. And we talked about the importance of Britishness, taking that abroad. But equally, I find our system slightly antiquated. I was baffled. My son, who's now actually at university, but this is a moment in time when he was 6 years old, was preparing for his 7+ exams and trying to get a 6-year-old to sit down and do verbal and non-verbal reasoning practice papers at home over the dining table when all you wanted to do was kick a ball outside. It baffled me. And the fact that at 11 or 13, at 16, we have to assess these children again and again, really I struggled with. And I thought, well, can we build an organization which actually, rather than put the test center at the start of the head of the organization and drove everyone just focused on a singular assessment, we love education? Can we build a system which is generally all through? And can we value the co-curricular just as much as the curricular? And recognize that in my upbringing, some of the things I did outside the classroom probably contributed more than actually inside the classroom, and recognizing the importance of all those things. So we're building our own curriculum called the Duke's Diploma to sit alongside the classic sort of mainstream IB and A-level curriculum, and valuing things like character and virtues and wisdom and all the things that kind of actually intrinsically we know we're going to give you more humanness and more connectiveness in the world of AI. And I think probably serve you even better than not to undermine the importance of a maths A-level. But
I couldn't agree with you. No, I think this, and I know it, but there are so many boys out there that are, and girls that are being mischaracterized. Is that the right word? Where, our education system does need to change. We need people like you pioneering it. So children like my son, don't get kicked out the education system because they just don't know how to be in our current education system. So, I think what you're building, and it's quite, it's close to my heart because of my own children. But I think if you can make that sort of difference to children, it's an amazing thing to do. And that's not just because you're sitting in here, but I didn't know any of this beforehand. You haven't used SEN at all. You use the word unique learning profiles. That's a sort of brand risk, really, especially in today's age, or is it? Or maybe not. Parents, regulators are used to SEND. Has that cost you partnerships? Has it cost you any deals because you've gone, no, we're unique learning profiles, we're not SEND?
I just think today we are living in a world of conflict. If we open the papers and put on the news, there are wars going on in various parts of the world. And we're increasingly divided because we determine people through either race, religion, gender. And I just think the unfortunate language that we use to label children is exactly the carbon opposite of what we're trying to do. So if we break it down beyond trying to get these children to academically succeed, we're trying to give them the confidence to succeed in the world. And we know that it directly correlated to trust, sense of belonging, and giving people a safety of where they can perform. So if an employee came to me and I told them they were useless, I called them names, and I told them they probably won't achieve, or they have to sit different exams than everyone else, or sit in a different part of the office, because you're just not going to be in the right frame of mind. So let's come up with terminology. Let's get away from the labels and recognize that everyone's on the spectrum, and everyone's going to succeed. And that's why in Cavendish, 100%, not 99, 100% of our children is our mission that they will either go off straight into employment, into vocational training, or into university. And that's the mission of the business. It's very simple. It's not, and we don't say we're going to get the best GCSE or A-level results, or BTECs or MBQs or T-levels or whatever the latest qualification is. And we want these children to succeed. And I think it's reframing that. And what's, rather than losing deals, I think we won things because parents have come in and said, that's what we want. We want someone who really believes in these children. I really believe these children can succeed. And actually, it's been totally opposite. And you can see the tremendous growth. We've gone from, in Cavendish, 0 to 25 schools in a very short space of time. I think it's probably one of the fastest growing organizations in that space. But it's the same mindset we operate Dukes with, because the inclusivity that we have, that in the classroom, and more so internationally than perhaps in the UK, where you could have someone who's dyslexic, autistic, and there's a mainstream classroom, and the quality and the impressiveness of the teachers that they can differentiate and teach is profound. But we want not the top set just to do well, it's everyone.
Yeah, real inclusivity, I think, isn't it? From accept everybody for who they are, not what they're going to become. And I think sometimes the independent sector can focus on that. This is what they can potentially become, rather than allowing to be the children that they are and develop that confidence. And I think then they develop the need to grow themselves, with that. So, okay, next question. You've hired head teachers from St Paul's, Latymer GDST, serious educational pedigree. Did any of them ever push back on your business decisions and say, this isn't how schools work? And who won that argument?
So we've been blessed, as you say, and I think you're referring to Professor Mark Bailey, who was the High Master for a decade of St Paul's, who came in initially to be on our advisory board, chaired our advisory board, got to know the organization over a number of years. And then when his time at St Paul's was up, became one of our managing directors, and effectively our sort of in-house chair of governors, looking after 8 to 10 schools. David Goodhue did a very similar thing. Alongside his role at Latymer, he was on our advisory board, chaired it, then joined us. And Libby, slightly different route, Libby Nicholas, who was a head at GDST, a very young head, and then ran the education team, then became CEO of a multi-academy trust, so also saw the stake side, and then joined us. All three genuine powerhouses, intellectual horses in this educational world, and incredible humans, values-based, and genuinely in it for the betterment of children. But all three had the opportunity to see our model, to see how well we pay our staff. And downstairs, you've seen our training center, 400 different courses, free of charge, intellectually stimulating these people, collaborating, they're learning from each other, real peer group facilitation. And that love of learning, intellectual curiosity that we're driving amongst teachers means not only are they intellectually learning, and they're being paid, pensioned, but also in the well-being of their care in terms of gyms and facilities and access to private GPs and all the other things that go with the state of the organization. And that's the first thing. And that they were deeply passionate about looking after the care of staff. But the thing that really struck them was, can you have an economic model and positive capitalism at its very best, where you're charging school fees very similar to the charitable schools. So we can't charge any more than the market would very much say, go round to someone else's school, paying our staff well, and creating an economic surplus, which now all the charity schools really need to do, otherwise they would fall under. But taking that surplus and reinvesting all of it, I want to say all of it and some more, in the development of Nella Hall School or Cardiff Bay or the extensions of the various projects that we're doing. And when they start to see that, actually they start to see, actually, this is a really effective way of creating change. And when you start to see it done in the right way, we should be celebrating companies, and there are many others like us, who are doing things which charities couldn't do in the decade that we've been able to do it. And the sector needs investment. The fabric of schools needs investment. Teachers need investment. And actually, what an organization like Duke's and a lot of my fellow peers can able to do is actually ignite that change much faster than charitable group can do. So to answer your question, actually, they've aligned. They're very supportive. They provide healthy challenge. And one of the things I was adamant at the start of the organization, majority of the board will be educators. So those voices around the table to ensure that challenge exists and that to ensure that we put the child at the center of the organization would always happen is there. But did we have to win them over? Absolutely not, because it's evident in what we're doing. We're here to serve children.
They got the mission, basically.
And reality exists in action. So it's the small things that we do. So you take the pandemic by way of example, which is the organization that gave the biggest discounts to parents and were the first out the blocks to do so. Who gave their staff when we had an opportunity to make them redundant or put them on furlough and only paid them 80%, who paid them 100%? And so these are small actions which some of the charitable schools didn't do, which a commercial and what we're accused to be a for-profit, and the perception might be that we would be the opposite. And actually, we were leading the care of both the children, but also the staff in those decisions. And they can start to see that. There's real heart in not only how we look after the kids, but how we look after the organization. And that goes back to our point about legacy. We want to be an organization where we're not the biggest, but to be the world's most admired organization, you have to run the organization in a way which is putting education at the heart of it. And the most important strategic priority is the quality of education. It's on the walls. It's in our strategic plans. We have a dedicated team to it, and they can see in tough times, we're actually investing in that team rather than actually taking away from that.
So you just spoke about COVID and you just spoke about not putting anyone to furlough, but there must have been a catastrophic moment for the school group at your scale. Tell me about the worst week, not the strategy, not the press or anything like that, or the bit that you were going to put out, but what actually was going on in your head.
I think it was deeply, deeply scary. We generally didn't know what was going to happen, and it feels slightly surreal now even talking about it. It was just happening on another planet. I think there was a sense of unity as well, with the whole country was in it together. Little things, how we all came out for the NHS and clapped and sort of banged our tins in the evenings. And even the Prime Minister, I know he's been questioned for his morals and party gay and so on, but the fact he came on national television, or one of his representatives did every night, shows how powerful our democratic government is and the institution of our politics is. And there was something almost special about that. Financially, hugely tough. Absolutely. There were times where I thought the organization wouldn't survive. There were times where we were in very deep discussions with our lending banks on their appetite to continue those arguments of frauds and often went into the early hours of the night. And so in the day, you were supporting the team with online learning. And actually, I did some lessons myself, and I really found it challenging. I teach every so often when I can, even today. Teaching children in a classroom is so much easier. You get interaction. You see their faces. You get energy. You can break out. Doing it online was really hard work, and I have to say, all the teachers in the country, I mean, what an incredible job they did. So we were doing that in the day. We were trying to sort of keep everyone's morale high. After the Prime Minister spoke, we as a group team, we'd get together on a meeting to decide what's been told. Are we opening, closing? Are we going left or right? We're having to make very, very quick decisions. And then I'd write something to the staff every evening by 8 o'clock. So every evening, and you're trying to come up with stories. And it's a bit like doing an assembly every day. I was finding various cartoons or various things to find, just to break it up from making it too sort of official. And we had this running story, which was I lived at the time with my children on Hartington Road. So our family house was called Hartington School. And basically I described what we did on homeschooling with my children every day. So I'd had a debate with my son, or where we go outside in the garden and do something, and we'd tell these stories, and there was a kind of a fun. But generally at night, the fisticuffs of the banks wasn't pleasant. And yeah, there were moments of time where I didn't think we'd make it. But I have to say, maybe it's fate or meant to be, but maybe it was the sheer pull of the wonderful people that surround me. It was just too important a project to let go of. And I think what the pandemic taught me was my pure love for the organization. And you asked me earlier, would I sell it? And no one knows what could happen to in the world and what happens to life. But I tell you what, that was a moment in time where I went, I deeply love the organization. And when I, with my limited resources, were writing checks into payroll to keep everyone afloat, and I invested more in the business and I doubled down at that moment in time, and I was absolutely committed. So I was the first to do it. And it was a real sign of confidence, but it was a sign of confidence for me. It was instinctive, and I knew I was in the right place for me, and I was going to fight for this.
Yeah, that's interesting. And agility, unbelievable agility to be able to turn on sixpence, because there are a lot of schools that have not survived that. So, okay.
Selling into schools isn't like any other business-to-business sale. Budget cycles, safeguarding, multi-stakeholder decisions, it's a different game entirely. B2 Education Mastery is the complete business development guide specifically for EdTech. Positioning, pipeline, stakeholder navigation, all of it, on demand for you and your team. Find it at seventhsibling.co.uk.
So you're not buying schools anymore. You acquired HPL, High Performance Learning, invest in the Institute of Education for 14 million. Nurseries, summer schools. That's not just an education group. That's an educational platform. What's the end game with all of those? Are you building? I know we talked about to sell, but you've got quite a few businesses coming into the mix now. Are you building an IPO or building an empire? And I think I'm answering my own question here, that you never want to let go of.
So from the outset, even when we're coming up with the name of both organizations, Dukes and Cavendish, at that moment in time, I lived on the corner of Cavendish Road. So actually, if I'm really honest, I looked out the window and had to come up with something, a name, which wasn't my name. I was very clear it shouldn't be anything to do associated with me. But so that we came up with Cavendish. The marketeers came up with the backstory that Henry Cavendish famously founded hydrogen, famously autistic, also from Cambridge. And so it kind of also worked very, very well. Dukes, if I'm really honest, was the fields across the road. There's Dukes Meadows in Chiswick, where I live at the moment time. And it was a protected name. So you had to write to Her Majesty the Queen and ask for permission. Could you use a royal name? And I got a lovely letter back, obviously my downstairs loo, giving me well wishes for the project and allowing us to obviously use the name. And so the question at that moment in time, was it Dukes Schools or was it Dukes Education? And from the outset, if I'm honest, we really believed in developing the whole child. Our purpose isn't for you to get to university or even to get the best GCSE or A-level results, even though we might have some of the best schools in the country that do that. It is for a child or a young person to lead an extraordinary life. Now, if you're setting someone up for life, means you have to give them the character, the experiences, the values, and really look after them in a holistic way. And you can't always do that fully in a school. So we always knew from the outset, we were Dukes Education. We were setting children up for life. So right from the get-go, the notion of what we call Dukes Plus today, the co-curricular, the work experience, the summer school, the activity camps, the tutoring, the college counseling, the supplementary education was there actually at the start of the organization. And then we've only continued to invest in it along the journey. But at the inception, these organizations and those concepts exist in a very original plan. And I'm delighted. And so alongside investing and we are continuing to buy schools, open new schools, invest in sites. But yeah, alongside that, we really want to develop a child from all the way and the team now called From Cradle to Cambridge and develop that journey the whole way through. And it's powerful because actually it's so difficult for a parent today with all the challenges they have to go find lots of different organizations. Why is it wonderful to find a one-stop shop where a single organization can provide all of these opportunities across the board?
Is there anything missing from the jigsaw puzzle yet? Is there anything a gap that you want to fill?
Constantly. So in the recent past, we've developed a ski and ski out school. It's the world's first ski and ski out where you put your backpack on, put your skis on your skis. And it's a project which is really taking shape in Verbier, which is sort of 3,000 meters up above sea level. Grey skiing, and actually they just won the European Championship. So actually, it's not only is the world's first ski and ski out school, it's also the best school. And so not only for the 250 children that are actually there, actually what it's also meant is a number of children from other schools been able to go there, visit, interact, and use those facilities. So that's been a really good project. And you can start to see in all the other things like sailing, other forms of sport, we could provide those facilities if we could form schools or at least parts of schools that could do that. And so we're constantly looking, and it's not just about sport. Our art school's doing really, really well. And can you take that concept and roll it around the world? We've embraced hybrid learning, online learning, and for certain theatrics, sporting, or people with families who are traveling, that can really work really well. So we're sort of joining the dots. I keep saying we're a decade in, but we've only really scratched the surface. I mean, like if you look at the European map today, we go from Dublin, Cork, all the way over to Athens, but there's still major cities that we don't have any presence. And even in places like Portugal, where we have 7-8 schools, we've only really started embedding really what we want to do and really putting our sort of elbows out and actually providing a service to that education community.
So almost in your roadmap, isn't it? It's schools in areas that you can develop. I know it's not a curriculum, but maybe pedagogy, like Verbier, for example, Verbier International School. That's a natural fit with the ski element. And as you say, obviously, you've got your world of your oyster then, isn't it? 'Cause you've got boating, you've got sailing, you've got all the different areas. So where's your next school? Where would you love to have a school? What's not on your list at the moment?
And you can look at a lot of the European cities where we haven't got schools. I'd say most of those, we'd love to have a school. We're underpenetrated even in our locations where we are. So in Ireland, in Portugal, in Spain, and Greece, where we have more than one school today, I'd love to have more. I don't want to give it a number because we like to work with schools that want to work with us. I very nervously don't use the word we acquire. Schools join our family. And so we want to work with people that would benefit from being part of a larger group whilst we're decentralized in nature and we empower the autonomy at the local level, but would benefit from being part of the wider family and would add something to our organization.
I think in the economic climate as well, I think more independent schools, because of VAT, are looking at going that way as well, isn't it? Definitely.
There's no shortage of schools wanting to join.
No. So you mentioned earlier kings and queens. So you're on the board. You're on boards for the king and queen. You're 473 steps apparently from Buckingham Palace. Is there a version of this story where you became the establishment? Does the expelled child, I've got written kid here, but I hate that one, child from West London State School ever look in the mirror and not recognise himself anymore?
I have a picture of me at primary school on my study desk at home, and it's a realization and understanding of where my roots are, where I come from. The 2 up, 2 down house that we grew up in is also on the picture next to it, which keeps me humble and grounded. And actually, if I'm honest, not only my wife, but also my children, they are the most humbling sort of things. So you come home and say, "I've got the most exciting thing," and they just want to play Lego, or they just want to have a hug, or they just want to go and tell you about their day. And so, whilst look, I'm incredibly proud of what the organisation has achieved, and I am very hopeful about what we will achieve, I am equally feel very balanced and grounded about what we're doing. Now, it's incredible exposure to have the monarchs of the country and have them involved in charities which are really serving young people, or in the British Asian Trust, the diaspora, and the region which desperately needs it. And what's been really inspirational is seeing their commitment and how hard they work on a daily basis to ensure their charities succeed. And actually, I find both of them, the King and obviously the Queen, actually deeply inspirational, actually. And I think we could learn a lot more as a British public by getting to know them better.
Yeah, that's a very humbling answer. And it's, as I know you look at those photos, but sometimes I think it's easy for anybody with success to lose sight of. And obviously, you've got a very interesting story as well with your mother and your son. All of those things, I think, must have developed you as a person and make you very grateful for just life itself. Must be a huge part of you.
Yeah, my father, who I see most Sundays, still asks me almost every time I see him, is what I'm grateful for, and have I prayed to be and show gratitude for what I have received. And I think I do feel grateful. I feel incredibly blessed, but equally I'm excited by actually what the children are doing and what my staff are doing. And the real marker of success for not the organization, but for me as an individual, is actually developing the people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I get real pleasure out of. I think seeing my team succeed, who I know are better than me, is actually one of those real great pleasures of life.
So you've got 23 schools in the UK, so 25 international schools across Europe in less than 3 years, which is, the international part of it. Give me the acquisition or decision that nearly broke the whole thing. Let's put COVID aside, but the one thing that has kept you up at night.
There've been so many.
Oh, that's really good to hear. There's a human element to that as well.
Look, when you're small, and for most of this journey, we've been very small, almost any of the schools that we were to bring in could have broken us. One of the very early schools was Cardiff Sixth Form College, notably the best school in the world by A-level results, but it had, and this is well publicised, it had some issues in its governance, and the Charities Commission and the Welsh Government asked us to take it over. So there was not much economic transaction risk, but actually we didn't have access to a P&L. We didn't have access to the liabilities. We didn't actually know what we were getting ourselves in for. So it's quite a wide berth in terms of what we're taking on, and it's huge responsibility. It's not something you could sort of just close down overnight, because it was a sort of national institution, particularly in Wales and Cardiff. So that was a real turning point, and it's obviously done incredibly well, largely because, and at the moment, what gave us confidence to do it was the head at the time, who still works for us in another role, and the team at the school and the children were just incredible. And the quality of teaching and learning was just outstanding. And so actually the core of the offering was solid, and actually it was the bits around it that kind of needed a bit of work doing to it. But that organization could have really brought us down if that got the wrong way. I think going abroad, the very first one, you're always nervous. It was easy knowing the difference between one side of Clapham and another side. I grew up in West London. I knew the difference between certain parts of very affluent areas, and you got to know traffic flows and where rivers and roads and how things happened. But when we went internationally and worked with a family who had developed a school in Lisbon, which is United Lisbon International School, ULIS as we call it, that was an incredibly risky move. And you're going into a regulatory environment, into an international role. I had this crazy rule when we started the organization: we would never develop a school more than 2 hours from my house. And whilst it was just, someone could see it as laziness, but actually there's a metric. I wanted to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and get to school at 8 o'clock. And in those very early days, I'd stand on the school doorsteps 2 days a week to get to know parents and children. And if you had schools abroad, you wouldn't be able to do this. So going abroad, it was a big step. And actually, I have to say, the Portuguese welcomed us in with open arms. I was slightly nervous about post-Brexit, trying to sell Britain to an international community outside of the UK. But what a warm group of people they were. And that school has just gone off on the most extraordinary journey. And we've now have the British School in Lisbon, we have the International Sharing School, we have a school in Braga, and we have a school in Porto as well. And they're doing all phenomenally well.
It's amazing as well, isn't it? Because there's a cultural difference too, isn't it? Even though it's the British curriculum, you have to deal with the cultural difference. So I lived in Spain and my children went to an international college, and it was really interesting. 98% of the students were Spanish. And, there was a tiny, tiny portion that were English. But I think that's where the international schools, I don't know whether you're finding that now, but because people love British education, that's what they're buying.
They really do. And I just don't think we probably appreciate it as much here. But when you're abroad, you really get a sense of how, and it's the intangible. It's not the A-level curriculum. It's the things that go around it. It's the character and virtues. It's the rigor. And it is something really special about what we have here.
I think that's worldwide. I think especially schools like Harrow, they're over in China, and I think it's being pushed out more and more. So I think that's a really nice finish. So thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. So thank you very much. And we're going to say goodbye from B2 Education Unpacked. Thank you, Eddie. And join us on the next one. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for turning up, and thank you for being here. I really, really do appreciate it. Do me one last favour. Just press the subscribe, and then you'll get notified of all of our amazing podcasts.